And welcome back to the show, everybody. My name is Brian Elam. I will be your host on this episode of the Be Successful series here on Get Your Entrepreneurship Together. Today, I have a very special guest. Dan Gingis is here with us. And Dan is an amazing speaker. And he is also the experience maker for companies. So if you're watching this as an entrepreneur, as the head of a company, even a solo entrepreneur, and you want to know how to start thinking about wowing your customers with a great experience, this is the podcast that you need to watch again, download, listen to over in Spotify, whatever it takes. This is going to be the one. So Dan, I am super excited to get into this with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure, Brian. Very excited to talk with you as well. So let's do this.
Let's go. So you are, like I said, known as the experience maker. You've worked for, off the top of my head, Discover. You've worked for McDonald's as well. And what I'm curious about, I always go back to the origins because it's so interesting how people got started. So how did your journey to get into this world, this way of thinking, how did that start and develop for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because, to my knowledge, you still can't get a degree in customer experience anywhere. I went to business school, got an MBA, but there were no majors in customer experience. So it is one of these things that is more art than science, I think. But that actually makes it more applicable to everybody and more approachable for everybody. So for me, I came at it as a marketer. Most of my corporate career was in marketing. I started literally in the direct mail business, and then moved up to all of the digital channels, email, SEO, social media, all of them. And then when I was at Discover, I got recruited into a role because Discover really likes generalists. So if you're in any role for more than 2 years at Discover, you are ancient and you're almost pushed out of the role to go do something else. And so I got recruited to this role called Head of Digital Customer Experience. And I remember going to talk to the Chief Digital Officer, who was the one recruiting me. And I was like, look, I'm flattered, but I have no idea why you picked me. I am a marketer. I've never done digital customer experience. I don't even know what it is. So why me? And he said something that completely changed the path of both my corporate career and then really got me started in this space that I still sit in today. He said, look, I've been watching you in business meetings, and you are the person that always is wearing the customer hat. You are looking at business problems through the lens of the customer. And this was 2012. He said, we got to start doing that in digital because the digital experience and the customer experience are going to become the same. Boy, was he right. And so this was one of these things that I hadn't really thought about of myself, right? I mean, I knew that I was doing that, but no one had put it into words. And as soon as he said it, I was like, yeah, that is what I do. And this is going to be really interesting to see if I now can apply this to a digital space. So I got put in charge of Discover's website, which only had about 50 million logins every month. So this was this was the number one, it still is the number one channel that customers engaged with the brand on. And I really quickly found that making little changes on the website had huge ripple effect benefits to the business in other places. So I might fix a little problem on the website that was, maybe a button wasn't appearing correctly or a page wasn't loading fast enough or just something that seems small. But we could tell that it was a problem because people were calling into the call center to complain about it. And then I fixed the problem. And next thing we know, hundreds of calls just disappear. Now, when you know that a call costs you between, say, $7 and $10 on average per call, and I just got rid of 10,000 calls, it's like, whoa, I spent like an hour's worth of coding work and I just saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. That to me blew my mind. And so I really dug in and we worked on all of these things that were just little annoyances, little death by a thousand paper cuts kind of things that nobody intended to do to our customers, but they were there. And my proudest achievement in corporate America was I led the team at Discover that won the J.D. Power Award for customer satisfaction for the very first time. We took it away from another amazing company. You've probably heard of them, American Express, that had basically won that award every year of its existence until I came in. And so that just got me off and running, and I fell in love. And now I get to do this for other companies, and it's super fun.
Excellent. Well, that is a great origin story. I'm glad that the person, that chief digital officer saw that in you and gave you that chance, because obviously it was a springboard into a great path and a great career. And you had kind of mentioned that you started off in copywriting. Now, would you consider yourself a copywriter as well?
Well, I've been a writer for a long time. When I was in college, my main extracurricular activity was the college newspaper. In fact, I'm now today on the board of directors of the same college newspaper, so I'm helping other collegiate journalists. I wrote probably 250 articles in my time there, and then I was an editor. And although I never really wanted to go into journalism, those writing and editing skills have helped me throughout my entire career. And so I've always considered myself a writer. I still, writing is my favorite medium, more than, I still do all this video stuff because everybody says you got to do videos, but it's just not me, right? I really much prefer the written word. But again, that helps in terms of writing speeches, writing books, writing blogs, and just generally communicating with people. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily refer to myself as a copywriter, but I would say that writing is a lot of what I do.
Yeah, and that is so interesting because, again, when I first found you and discovered you, it was through, like we were talking about before we hit the record button, on that F&G webinar talking about how insurance people can make their experience better, right? And you were so engaging, as a speaker and as a personality on that video. It's kind of strange that you would say that writing is so much more comfortable for you. Now, is this so the whole doing video thing, is that something that you do just out of necessity because it's, you kind of have to, quote unquote, but it's still kind of uncomfortable for you?
Well, it's interesting. If you ask my mom, who's now 80 years old, and you ask her about my childhood, one of the things that she will come up with invariably is that I always hated getting my picture taken. And I don't know why. I had a full head of hair back then. There was no reason not to, but man, I never really liked it. And still today, I just went to a photo shoot recently, and it's like the most uncomfortable thing for me. And so I do a lot of webinars because that's part, I mean, speaking is my business. And so most of my speaking is live on stage in in-person events, but I also do a lot of stuff virtually, of course. That started in 2020, and it's really continued. And so that when I'm actually doing a presentation, either live or virtual, that's very comfortable to me because I've gotten comfortable with it. First of all, it's my content, so I know my content really well. I am a storyteller at heart. And so, as you noticed from my talk contains a lot of different stories. And to me, that's both fun to present and it's fun to watch the audience reaction. So I often survey my audiences, and one of the questions I ask them is, what was your favorite story that you heard me tell today? And what's awesome is nobody picks the same story. Like, there's a wide variety of stories. And so what I can tell from that question is that every story appeals to somebody. And if I can get just one story that appeals to everybody, then I'm doing a great job. Usually what happens is people remember more than one, which is great. But that has become really comfortable. And ironically, this came from the same chief digital officer, because once I took the job, we had to do one of these HR things that I always just didn't like and never gave a lot of attention to. But they had us do we were writing like a personal development plan. I'm like I don't really care. And I went and talked to him. I'm like, what do I write for this thing? And he said, Gingis, your personal development plan is super easy. I'm like, awesome. I get a pen. I'm like, tell me, what is it? He goes, I want you to become a recognized expert in customer experience. And I'm like, okay, given that this is my second day on the job, I'm like, what does that even mean? What does that look like? And what he said to me is, I want you out there at events on the speaking circuit, telling everybody about all the great stuff we're doing at Discover, because nobody knows us and nobody knows what we're doing. And so that started getting me onto some stages, first as a, in panels, and then ultimately as a solo speaker. And what was fascinating to me was people came up to me afterwards and they said, I never thought of getting a Discover card. But now that I heard you talk about the company, I'm going to go home and apply for one. And I was like, what? Really?
Wow.
Like, seriously? And so that gave, that feedback sort of told me, okay, maybe I'm decent at this. And then it became, can I create my own content so that I'm not just talking about Discover, but I have my own content that I'm bringing into the world. And so he didn't really know at the time he was creating a monster, but I still talk to him and I tell him, man, thanks for pushing me on that one.
That's so amazing. That is so awesome. And speaking of social media and being out there and just following you, you are a great follow on LinkedIn. I've
Oh, thank you.
as soon as I saw you speak, I added you immediately, and you get to see if you follow Dan on LinkedIn, you get to see his experiences and joy when interacting with other companies and their unique little touches that they put out into the world. And you get to get ideas as well about how you can incorporate that. So link's going to be below. So if you're not already, go ahead and follow Dan because he's a great follow in that respect. And I wanted to get into also this idea that everyone at a company is involved with the customer experience. This is something that I read on your site and I found it and know it to be true, but I believe that there are probably some people out there that have zero human interaction with, their customers of the company. Like maybe they're doing accounting, they're crunching numbers all day, working on spreadsheets. They're not talking to people on the phone or answering emails from customers. How are they involved in the customer experience and what can that look like?
So to answer that, I like to share, I guess I might call it an allegory, a fictional story that is certainly based on truth. So I imagine, this was about 15 years ago, there's a person in the finance department of a major airline. And the airline's struggling and they're trying to find new revenue opportunities. So they've assigned the finance department to try to figure this out. And so this young pup comes to his boss and he says, I got it. I got the way that we can make an incremental billion with a B dollars a year. And the boss is like, sweet, lay it on me. And the accounting person says, we should start charging customers to check their bags. And the boss said, but wait, they've been doing it for free for 50 years. And the accounting guy says, exactly. And therein starts a new policy, which believe it or not, is only, I think it's 12 or 15 years old.
Yeah,
Where
it's not that recent. Yeah.
yeah, and so for 50 years, everybody could check their bags for free. Now it's a fee. Now, do customers get any additional value for this fee? No, not at all. In fact, two major airlines recently announced an increase in the fee for no additional value at all for the customer. And then you wonder, why are the airlines still one of the industries that people love to hate? It's because they make decisions like that that are solely business decisions. They're solely about money and they have nothing to do with the customer. Now, I'm a believer that we can make great business decisions that are also customer centric. And that when we focus on the customer in our decisions, we end up making better business decisions that still make us money. There's nothing wrong with making a profit, 100%. But we shouldn't do it on the backs of our customers. We should do it in service of our customers. And so that to me is a great example of an employee who probably never spoke to one of their travelers, one of their flyers, right? Because he's stuck behind a desk. And I'm using the pronoun he because for some reason I think this was a guy that did this to us, but I don't know. I have no knowledge of that. But that person is not out there, the parent of a family of five trying to get on their summer, or their spring break and they've got 4 bags, and now all of a sudden, this trip just cost $200 more than they thought it was going to, right? And he's never experienced that. And so therefore, this is a great idea on paper, but it doesn't think through the impact on the customer. I wrote a blog post recently called Price versus Value. And the whole idea of it is, look, we understand, consumers understand when prices have to go up. There's all sorts of reasons. We went through a big crunch with supply chain a couple of years ago. We've gone through inflation. There's all sorts of reasons why costs go up and therefore price has to go up. But if we think about a price increase and also think about a value increase at the same time, our customers are much more willing to pay for it. So a perfect example there is Amazon's Prime program. So when Prime first launched, it was $79 a year, and what you got for it was 2-day shipping, which at the time was incredible. Now today, Amazon Prime is something like $179, except it's got a list of benefits that's like 6 pages long on the website. And you get not only 2-day shipping, but sometimes 1-day shipping, sometimes same-day shipping. You get access to Amazon videos, you get photo storage, you get discounts at the Whole Foods and other places. And so they've continued to add value to this program while they've raised the cost. And wouldn't you know it, people still love Amazon Prime. They raise the cost and almost nobody leaves. This is a cost I can tell you personally, I don't even notice when they charge it on my credit card every year because I'm so willing to pay it. But that's because I know I'm getting tons of value out of it as well. So you compare that and that way of thinking where it's customer first, even though we're making a lot of money, versus the airlines where it's profit first and we're not even thinking about the customer. And again, it's not difficult to find the conclusion of, wow, customers love Amazon and hate the airlines. What do you know?
What do you know? Exactly. That's a great comparison. And it leads exactly where I wanted to go next, which was how do you start tooling that thinking or getting, that customer-centric experience to the front of somebody's brain so they start thinking about it, focusing on it, and start implementing ideas? Like, how do you start that process with people?
Well, when you introduced me, you referred to me as the experience maker, which I appreciate, and that is the name of my company. But I look at my job as helping companies to create an army of experience makers at their company, because ultimately that's what we want, is we want all of our employees to both be inspired and empowered to be experience makers. When we make experiences, we end up keeping more customers, they stay longer, they spend more, and they tell others about us. And that's what every company wants. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. More customers who stay longer, spend more, and tell others about you. And so a lot of it is, my job often is creating the inspiration. And so when I get up on stage, especially in a group full of, an all-employee meeting, town hall, that kind of thing, I want to get everybody excited about customer experience. Because as you saw, even on a webinar, I'm excited about customer experience. And I do have a reasonable skill of getting other people excited about it. Then what we need is empowerment. And empowerment, almost always comes from the top of the organization. And it looks like this. It basically says, you are never going to get in trouble if you do something that helps a customer. Now, we may tell you later on that we'd like you to do it a different way, or we'd like you to spend less money doing it, or what have you. But no one's ever going to be mad at you if your goal was to help a customer. One of my favorite stories to tell, my very first job out of college, I worked for a direct-to-consumer collectibles company called the Danbury Mint. They sold plates, dolls, figurines, sports paraphernalia, all this kind of stuff that you put on your mantle. And I was in the product management area, which meant that I owned a bunch of product lines. And my job was to create marketing plans around them, execute those marketing plans, and ultimately sell more products. So one day on December 23rd, I got a call that came to my desk that should have gone to customer service. I have no idea how they got my direct number. And it was this woman, she was a grandma, and she was all distraught because she had ordered one of our products and it hadn't arrived, and Christmas was in 2 days, and the gift was for her granddaughter, and she's all upset. And so I thought to myself, all right, well, this isn't my job. I'm not in customer service. I can't even look up her account. I don't have that sort of access. But something kicked into me where I was like, all right, I'm just going to do the best I can for her. And so I asked her for her name and her address and what product she had ordered. And I said, ma'am, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do this, but Christmas is not going to be ruined on my account. I will take care of this for you. And she thanked me profusely and hung up the phone. So I got up out of my desk. I walked over to our warehouse. I found the product that she was looking for, pulled one off the shelf. I went over and boxed it up for her and put the peanuts in and sealed the box. And then I took it over to the FedEx station and, I had to do overnight shipping because there's no delivery on Christmas. So I got to get it on the 24th. And that all came naturally to me because I was like, look, I'm just solving the problem for the customer, right? Now, at the end of the day, I don't know how many company rules I broke, right? I'm sure they weren't thrilled that I did overnight shipping. That probably cost $90 or something for a $50 product. But ultimately, I not only retained a customer that day, but I created a loyal advocate. And ultimately, the company might have come back to me. They never did, but they could have come back to me and they said, look, Gingis, next time this happens, we'd like you to do this a slightly different way. But the point is, I didn't get in trouble. In fact, people were happy with me for saving a customer. And I believe that every employee needs to be empowered because then what happens is they'll find creative solutions like I found. Right? I didn't know what to do. That just sort of came to me, and I walked to the warehouse and was like, well, let's see if we can figure this out. And if we can get every one of our employees to think that way, then they're always doing right by customers, and that is a good thing for our business. And it does take time. Absolutely. And we do have to convince people like the accounting team and the legal team and the HR team that, yeah, customer experience is your job too. It's not in your title, it's not in your job description, but we expect it to be part of your job. When we can do the combination of inspiration and empowerment, that's when we start to see businesses become truly customer-centric cultures, and then there's no stopping you.
Mhm. And thinking about the HR people that you just mentioned there, I was wondering if it connects and plays out legitimately in your mind, where if the HR people can make a better experience, maybe interviewing people, if that could potentially filter down into customer experience with the company.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, customer experience is delivered via humans and technology. And so the humans that we have got to be people that enjoy servicing other people, right? That have empathy as part of their makeup, that are dedicated to service, and that understand the power of customer experience. I always like to ask companies, it's a trick question. And by the way, this applies no matter how big your business is. If you're a solopreneur, the answer is going to be the same. What is your biggest asset that your company has? And the answer is really simple. It's not your product inventory. It's not your trademarks or anything like that. It's your customers. Because it is the one thing that if it goes away, you don't have a business. As a solopreneur myself, I know that I don't need employees to have a successful business. Employees are important, but they're not required. Customers, those are required. We don't have customers, we don't have a business. So if we teach our employees to treat them that way, to be like, look, we need to keep the customers we have and continue to get more of them. And without them, none of us have jobs. That's how important they are. And so that, again, starts to create this kind of culture. So you're right, it's definitely the interviewing. It's also once employees are there, it's about creating an experience for them that is something that they appreciate, that they enjoy, and then therefore they can turn into an experience for customers. Oftentimes what happens, especially when we hire younger people, what happens is we tell them that we want a good customer experience, but they've never actually had one. So they don't know what one looks like, right? And so you can tell people till you're blue in the face to create a great customer experience, but if they don't understand you, they don't understand what it looks like, then they can't do it. So our job in an HR is to create an employee experience that's so good that they say, oh, I like how this feels, and I get it now. You're telling me to create this feeling for our customers.
Yeah, and yet another reason, guys, why Dan is such a good follow on social media and sharing that inspiration about how other companies are exceeding those expectations. It can seed those ideas within you to do for your customers. And I wanted to continue on the whole customer journey here for just a second, because you mentioned back in Discover that it was some customer feedback that had kind of spurred this whole thing about, changing a button location or speeding up page load or something like that. Now, when we're thinking about developing that customer experience, is it just the feedback that we're listening to from the customers, or is it also the ideas? Like if somebody has just an idea out of the blue to bring the customer experience up, is it both? Is it one like in the majority, or how does that work?
Yeah, such a great question. And I actually just wrote about this for my blog as well, is there's this dynamic and this balance in customer experience between one side, which is creating more positive experiences or elevating the positive experiences that you already have. And there's this other side, which is eliminating the negatives, getting rid of the death by a thousand paper cuts. And you can talk to 100 people and get 100 different answers on which is more important. I believe that you have to do both, and that it's the combination that makes the best experiences. Because ultimately, if we have the best experience, we work on are the positives, and we have this wonderful experience, we treat people so well, but on the back end, things don't function very well. Like imagine you walk into a hotel and you are welcomed with a fresh beverage and snacks, and you're welcomed by name, and you feel like you've just arrived in paradise. And then you go into your room and you lay down on the bed and the bed collapses on the floor. Like it doesn't matter that the welcome was so great, because now you're all you can think about is that the bed's collapsed, right? And so you can't have one without the other. If all you do is make sure the bed doesn't collapse, then you never have the part where somebody wants to talk about you and say, you'll never believe what happened when I checked into this hotel. They did this, this, and this. I've never seen that before. And so it's a balance of looking at both of those things. And I do try to share examples of each one of those. The getting rid of the problems isn't as sexy, but it can be just as effective. And I want to, just because you've mentioned it a couple times, I want to point out why I share the kind of content that I do. And there's really two things. The first is, as I said earlier, I don't think that customer experience is really a science. It's not something that you learn how to do. And in fact, one of my mom's favorite sayings, whenever I travel for speeches, she still tells me this every time I travel. She says, be aware of your surroundings. It's like a perfect mom thing to say. And I started thinking about this phrase, and I realized that this was also really good advice in customer experience, is that as we're all consumers in our real lives. And so if we just pay more attention to what's around us, to the things we like and the things we don't like, we're going to find lots of ideas that we can apply to our business. Great example. How many of your viewers love pop-up ads? Go ahead, we'll wait.
Yeah.
None of them, right? And so why would we ever put a pop-up ad on our website? There are no pop-up ads on my website. I've had other speakers tell me, oh, you need one of those pop-up ads where when they move the cursor up to go leave your site, it pops up and it makes, asks them if they want to subscribe to your newsletter. I'm like, why would they want to subscribe to my newsletter if they're leaving my site? And I know that's going to irritate them because it irritates me. So just being aware of our surroundings is a great thing. And most of the examples that I share on social media are examples I've taken pictures of with my own phone that I have just experienced in my life. Or what's really actually kind of fun for me is now a lot of people that are connected with me send me their own examples, which then I'll use as well, which is great. So my library keeps building. The other piece that's super important, though, is that we all can learn and be inspired by lots of different industries. And I'm a huge believer of this. So, you're in the insurance industry, and if all you do is look at competitors in the insurance space, you are not going to find a lot of inspiration. Because first of all, the insurance space may not have as much inspiration as you're looking for. And second of all, if you find that your competitor is doing something super cool, what are you going to do next? You're going to copy them. And that is no way to differentiate yourself, right? Because now two people are offering the same cool thing. Whereas if I can give you an idea that comes from a hotel or an amusement park or a bookstore or some other industry that has nothing to do with insurance, but you can apply it back to your industry and do something similar, now you're standing out from the competition. And now people look at you and say, I want to go with this guy because his experience is unique, makes me feel good, makes me feel valued. And I don't care that he's a little bit more expensive. I don't know if you are, but the price part doesn't matter at that point. It's because we want to buy from people that we like, and we want to buy from people that provide us with a great experience. So the other thing I try to do is share lots of examples from lots of different lots of different industries. So you might see something from the pest control industry and be like, well, that has nothing to do with me. But maybe it does, because maybe something that some pest control company is doing gives you an idea for something that you can do for your customers.
100%. The first mentor that I had in the entrepreneurship space, one of the things that he would say all the time is, I don't care what you're doing, what you're watching, or who you're listening to. If you're sitting there thinking this has nothing to do with me, you're in the wrong headspace. You need to have a mindset shift and start thinking, how can I apply this to what I do? Or look for those nuggets, just like you were saying. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw in on top of that because I think it's super important. And to that vein, I'm wondering if Blue Ocean Strategy has a spot on your bookshelf.
Of course. Why not? I
Yeah,
would love to.
exactly.
As long as it's signed, because I have two bookshelves. I have my bookshelf and then I have my signed bookshelf. And that's the one that I really highly value.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So good. So good. Um, Lastly, again, you are such a great speaker, and I appreciate the work that you have put into becoming so eloquent and engaging. And I was wondering, for any entrepreneur that wants to step onto stages, either virtually or personal, like live, for any entrepreneur that wants to do those things and speak and get their product out there, what would you say would be the best path or a good place to start to begin developing that skill set?
Yeah, it's interesting because, public speaking is one of those things that very few people are ambivalent about. They either love it like I do, or they are absolutely terrified of it. If you're absolutely terrified, and I'm not sure there's a ton I can suggest to change that. But what I would say made me comfortable was, first of all, I talk about things that I know. So if you told me tomorrow that I needed to do a webinar on chemistry, for example, I would be terrified. And I would spend the entire night learning as much as I could about chemistry, knowing that it wouldn't be possibly enough to do a really good presentation. But I would be nervous. I would be worried about screwing it up. I'd be worried about being embarrassed, etc. Whereas when I'm telling my own stories and I'm using my own content, it's more like having a conversation, and like we're doing right here. And so that becomes a whole lot more natural. Another thing that I've learned is a lot of speakers try too hard to memorize things, and that never goes over well. I was actually in a public speaking course last year that was about a 6-month course, and there was a student in there, and she was trying to tell a story on stage of something that had happened with her and her boss. And let's just say, it was not a good 3 or 4 minutes for her. She couldn't remember. She had tried to memorize the whole thing, and so she was stumbling through it all, and she couldn't remember the words, and she was frustrated. And she got off stage, and even though everybody clapped for her, she felt terrible. And I saw her later that night at dinner, and I said, "Hey, do you mind if we just do a little experiment together?" And she said, "Sure." I said, "Tell me that story about you and your boss." And she told me the story, didn't stutter, didn't mess up a word, didn't stop, because it's a story that happened to her. It's like in her own life. So she knows the story. And I said, what you just did was tell me a story versus you memorizing a script of a story. And that made all the difference in the world. And if you, by the way, forgot a detail, I don't know because the story didn't happen to me, right? It was still a pretty interesting story. I enjoyed it. You did a great job telling it. And if you forgot something, you're the only person that knows. And it's funny because a while ago, I had the opportunity to speak on stage at one of the big companies I worked for, and I had a 5 minute slot to speak to literally the entire company. And I'm sitting next to a guy waiting to go on stage. He's waiting as well to go on stage. And this guy is like 2 or 3 levels higher than me in the organization. And he is sitting here, no joke, with a 3x5 card, and he's got a pencil, and he is taking notes on top of his notes. And he's like scribbling and he's writing all these bullets and he's sweating. And I'm like, I turned to him, I'm like, dude, what are you talking about today? And he told me, and I said, I may be wrong, but aren't you our company's foremost expert on this topic? He goes, yes, I am. I said, then no one is going to know if you forget bullet number 7 on your list right there. Just go up and talk about the stuff that you know. And he did. And he did a great job. And so did this woman when she told me her story over dinner. So I think a lot of it is the worry that people have of public speaking is it gets in their head that the idea is we've got to memorize things. And the truth is, I may tell a lot of the same stories over and over again, but no 2 times have I told them exactly the same. And that's okay. In fact, it adds a little bit of color and it adds a little bit of texture every time that I tell them.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea that just because you're on stage, you're the one on camera, whatever, that you have to be quote unquote perfect. You've got to nail every aspect. It's not true at all. And I know this from being a musician as well, being up on stage. You know, we were just talking before we hit the record button about last night. I went out and played a gig. Now, did I play everything absolutely perfectly? No, I didn't. But am I the only one that knows that? Yep. Even the guys in my
Exactly.
band, even the guys in my band were like, "Yeah, you played great last night, man. Everything sounded good." I'm like, "Yeah, except for that one part that I messed up that one time, but apparently nobody knew." So yeah, get that idea
Yeah.
of perfection out of your head.
Yeah, totally, totally, and and likewise, the opposite is true too. Is I'm sure because you love what you do when you're playing in a band, the people saw your passion, they saw the smile on your face, they saw, and they're going to remember that way more than if you missed a note. And similarly, one of my favorite compliments that I get from people when I get off stage is people will come up to me and they'll say, "You must really love what you do." That's what they say. And I'm like, that's the best compliment you could give me because that means I'm projecting out my passion to the audience and they can tell. And so that's a different compliment than, oh, I learned so much, or, oh, you taught me this, or you inspired me this. No, they come up and they say, you must really love what you do. And so I think that's great. And I'm imagining, although I wasn't in your audience last night, I'm imagining that that comes out when you play music too, because it's a passion. And I think for any entrepreneur, solopreneur out there that wants to talk about what they do, what are you more passionate about than your own business? So talk about the things that you're passionate about. You're not passionate about selling people on your business. Nobody's passionate about that. You're passionate about what your business is about. My business is about customer experience. That doesn't mean that I'm out there talking about selling me as a keynote speaker. It means I'm out there talking about the topic that I'm passionate about, whether it's on social media or on stage or whatever. And so that comes out really naturally, and people appreciate that. They appreciate the authenticity behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point you just made about the authenticity because it is so important, especially now in this digital age that we're in, where everybody's looking at screens to figure out if they like somebody or not. And if you have that ability as an entrepreneur to connect through that screen and speak to that passion that you have inside about what it is that you do, Dan is right. It will come across and people will remember you. And the thing about that is, and Dan, I know you know this too, is people don't remember what you did for them. They remember how you made them feel. And
Indeed.
that's the crux of the consumer experience. Just like that lady that you helped with that little $50 tchotchke for her granddaughter.
Yeah.
You made all the difference in that woman's life, and you made an advocate out of her for the rest of her life, or the rest of the company's life, whichever came first. I don't know. But either
That,
way,
if you're still around.
either way,
Yeah,
it
and
was great.
one last One last thing I want to leave you with too, thank you for that, is this works in every industry. And one of the things I love when people tell me, well, my industry is boring or my industry is highly regulated or what have you. Look, I spent 14 years in financial services and another 2 in healthcare. So I know about tough industries that are highly regulated. But imagine, again, if we use you as an example, imagine one of your prospects saying, man, Brian is the most passionate guy about insurance that I've ever met. You've already gotten in with this person, right? Because is anybody passionate about insurance? Well, I don't know. What I can tell you is when I got into the credit card industry, the thing that shocked me the most was you were talking about feedback at Discover. The number one thing that I saw people write in written feedback was, I love my Discover card. And I'm like, who in the world loves their credit card? I get loving Starbucks, I get loving Disney, I get, loving Amazon, but a credit card. But when I started to peel back the onion, I realized it was because of what Discover's focus was. And their focus, being a smaller credit card company, not being able to compete with the biggest banks, was on service. And so that's why, I mean, I've never heard of anybody saying, I love my fill in the blank of a big bank card. You don't hear that. But if someone can love a credit card, that means they can love insurance, they can love actuarial services, they can learn, they can, love pretty much anything. You just have to get them to love it, and your passion and enthusiasm goes a long way to getting there.
100%. And yeah, unfortunately, we are getting right down to the wire here. Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation, and I want to make sure that people know where in the world can they find you, get into your world, and potentially, bring you on stage or bring you into the company to help increase their customer experience. Where can we find you?
Well, the good news, Brian, is I'm not difficult to find if you Google my name, which is great. We were talking beforehand about how I have a unique last name, and if you meet anyone with my last name, they're probably a family member. But I would say the best places are either my website, which is dangingis.com, or as you mentioned, LinkedIn. That is the one channel I focus the most on in social, and I'd love to connect. And then one of the things I teach on stage is being responsive. So if you reach out to me, I will be responsive. I'll answer your questions. I'm happy to engage and would love to be connected.
Excellent. And those links are going to be below. And guys, I can personally attest to Dan's responsiveness because I connected with him through LinkedIn and messaged to ask him to be on this podcast because of what you just witnessed and heard. And so, yes, he will respond if you reach out. So, Dan, again, thank you so much for this, man. I can't thank you enough. It's been a great conversation. And if you have anything that you want to leave us with, I'll give you the last few seconds.
All right. Well, I appreciate it too. Thank you so much for having me on. The last tip I will leave everybody is to become a customer of your own business. This is so critical because otherwise you never actually see your own business from the perspective of your clients or your customers. How do you do this? Do the things that you ask your customers and clients to do. If you ask them to create a login for your website, make sure that you have a login for your website. Try to forget your password because no company yet has made a great experience out of forgetting your password. Go through the steps. You make people fill out forms, you go fill out the form. And I guarantee if you're sitting there filling out the form being like, oh my gosh, this is a long form, that's exactly what your clients are thinking. And so again, being aware of the situation and putting yourself in the shoes of your customers is the single best way to figure out for your business what the next steps are.
There you go, guys. Another gold nugget right there for you at the end. Share this show, get it out there with your entrepreneurship circles, or even people that are just in your circle, because as we were talking about, everybody is a customer experience officer in whatever company that they're in. So share the show, get it out there, like it, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And again, Dan, thank you so much for coming on. It was an honor having you.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Peace. We'll see you in the next one.